Episode 26 of Operator Syndrome. Last episode, Steve had just graduated Sephardic, um, and we're going to talk more about what happened after that when as you were assigned to the training department after 2 deployments, including Desert Storm. We got a few admin notes Steve's going to cover.
Yeah, we'd like to just say that it's been brought to our attention that people might have questions of us. In fact, we've already received some of those that we're going to be addressing. They're very good questions and tying right into kind of our bigger theme of, the trauma that is a result of combat and special operations. So we have an email. We've established an email account. We'd love to hear from you. It's called, the email is Operator Syndrome Podcast, all one word, Operator Syndrome singular podcast @gmail.com. So let us know in anything really, questions, topics you'd like us to talk about, stuff to delve into. I'll just, as a teaser, one of the questions I got from one of our listeners was, if your son wanted you to be like dad and go into special operations, what would you say to him? That's a great question. And so we're going to be delving into a few of these initial questions coming up in a few episodes. But in the meantime, you have access to us through Operator Syndrome Podcast @gmail.com. And we'd entertain any and all of your thoughts. We appreciate our listeners, and we certainly want to scratch where if there's a certain itch that we're not hitting, and we're open. This is a broad podcast, and so we'd love to hear from you.
Okay. Yeah, looking forward. And if you all have stories, if there are moments where you're interested in our perspective, maybe we're folks who you think might be able to lend an informed ear to a situation you may have ever faced. I think that's something we're open to hearing from too.
Yeah, absolutely.
But back to the topic for today is continuing on with your timeline. You graduate Sephardic, you leave Army land, you get to go back to sunny California, and you're in the training department. So you come back and you've got the Sephardic cred. I think maybe we talked about this last time, but that did carry some weight when you came back.
Yeah, it did. It did. As I said, with the guys in training who really knew, and some of these guys had already been teaching close quarters battle, CQB. That school is pretty high watermark to get it. And man, honestly, I think there might have been only 4 or 5 people from our team to ever go to that school and complete it. And that's over the course of probably 6-7 years. So yeah, it was a big feather in the cap, and the leadership really got it because they saw bigger picture. And I did realize when I came back, because I kind of alluded to this last episode, they made me for the final training exercise, which is the big deal. It's the big final thing of the course. They made me a ground force commander, which to me was kind of shocking as an E5. I wasn't used to that. But then I saw the logic when I got back into training, because I was having to train entire platoons. So I'm training the platoon commander as well as the assistant platoon commander, the chief, everybody else. So now it kind of did click later that, oh, well, yeah, it was important that I was a ground force commander, because I'm in training department, albeit enlisted, but I still have to train officers. Because that's a SEAL thing that goes way back into BUDS. The main instructors are enlisted, and they're training the officers as well as the enlisted are right by our side. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of similar to Ranger School. It was kind of, hey, we're all in it. It doesn't matter. Your rank is kind of suspended while we're in the school.
Right.
So yeah, I thought that was a good takeaway. So yeah, I got back, was assigned. Now a training department at a SEAL team does many things. There's the diving department phase, doing combat swimmer attacks. Now, a lot of times they blend because, for example, you've got diving experts. Now, I was never a diving expert. I'm an expert diver, but I'm not an expert trainer. I don't know the rigs. I don't know how to do all the maintenance, all that. and they're pretty complicated. There's about 3 different types of rigs. But where I would kick in along with the diving people would be, okay, so we would do, say, an FTX in a combat swimmer course might be usually one of 2 or 3 scenarios. One would be swimming in and planting limpet mines, magnetic mines on a ship to either sink it or disable it, or both. An enemy ship, that would be. And I could tell you some funny stories. We had the explosive ordnance disposal, the Navy's explosive ordnance disposal unit trained dolphins. Yes, the animal, the dolphin, to hunt down enemy swimmers. This is just a funny aside. It didn't really have to do with what I did, but it was, they would put harnesses on these dolphins that had harpoons, like CO2 harpoons, and they could actually bump and spear an enemy swimmer. And like, if the Soviets were trying to attack our ships, they'd release these dolphins, and they trained them to hunt down combat swimmers, enemy combat swimmers. And they trained them. They had workers from like SeaWorld and stuff working with EOD.
That, I mean, that would kill a swimmer, right?
Yes.
I mean, it was
Yes,
just,
it would.
I mean, that's how, like,
Probably.
that's how they do, that's how they take out, and that's how they, like, No Country for Old Men. Isn't that like how
Yeah.
they take out like steer? Like,
Yeah, that kind of thing. It had an inflation device that would embolize somebody as it pulled you up to the surface. It probably could kill you just depending on where you got hit with the CO2 harpoon. But also, now you're on the surface and they're just going to gun you down from the ship. So yeah, it's not a good deal.
I feel like I'd heard about the dolphins looking for mines and tagging them.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'd heard that they had been trained to spot divers and disrupt them. I thought they would just run into them, and then I'm sure that would hurt if a dolphin ran into you. I didn't know that they were armed.
Harnesses. And I think PETA has been up in arms about it. And hey, I'm not getting into that mess. But what I can tell you is there were certain nights where the EOD guys would say, hey, you guys are out on a combat swimmer training op. Can we practice with our dolphins on you? And some aspiring officer would say, oh, sure. Now, they didn't put the real deal on them. They put like these rubber harnesses that they would just bump us. But you want to talk about being scared out of your wetsuit? They came out of nowhere and they're fast. And it's like, was that a shark? What the heck? You're trying to concentrate and these things, boom. And it's like, I need a change of wetsuit. They're really scary and fast. And then it's pitch black, right? And we're never diving in the daytime when you can see something coming. So anyway, that was kind of a funny aside.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, it's really wild.
I'd never heard about anything like that.
Now, okay, this is back in the dark ages. I don't know if they still do that. I mean, they got
laser beams now.
Yeah, laser. That's right. I'm so old that when we went through SEER school, which is called Survive, Escape, Resist, and Evade, did you guys go through that?
You could opt to go to it. It was one of our good deal schools. Yeah. I did not.
Yeah, it was required for us. And this is back in the day where they still waterboarded us. We got waterboarded, like real deal, choking, coughing, hacking. When they decided to make that illegal for doing against terrorists, I guess they stopped doing it to us too. It's like, well, but it was like, this is old school, man. This is back in the day. I mean, I'm not making that up. I remember it, and it was uncomfortable. Anyway, so there's a lot that may have changed, but back to shipboarding. So one of the 3 basic operations we would have against ships was to sink or disable it with bombs, basically underneath the hull. The other would be to board the ship and to either secure the bridge, or depending on what kind of ship and how many enemy crew, all that. And then the third would be to fast rope on top of a moving ship that had been taken by pirates, and to secure the ship. Again, kill the pirates, secure the ship. And so those were our 3 basic assault type of missions towards ships. One was more of a direct action sinking, and the others would be more assaulting. And then the other waterborne operation that we did a lot of training on is to take oil rigs. A lot of times oil rigs would be problematic. They would be taken by pirate forces or enemy combatants. We did some of this in the Gulf War. We took some oil rigs. My platoon did not. We were focused on other stuff, but some of them did. And that would be swimming in, putting up what's called a caving ladder. It's a narrow kind of ladder you climb. They use them in spelunking. That's why we call them caving ladders. They're wire that you can roll them up, and so they've got these aluminum rungs, not very big, about like that, and stainless steel cables going up, and you climb them. You just run them up with like these telescoping poles, hook them, and climb. So you would climb, and then from there, once you got on the surface of an oil rig or a ship, you assaulted. And so that's where I came in on, waterborne sort of assault type missions for ships and oil rigs. So I had to overlap with the dive guys, with the other departments. There's medical training, there's comms training, there's mortar training. I never got into mortars. I didn't know anything about them. And we really never even used mortars very much at all, but we had to know kind of how they worked. So I was assigned assaults. So it was the waterborne start type of assaults. And then there were hard target, we called them, like on land buildings, whether they involved hostages or just high value targets. So we had to go in and clear the place and kill them, or capture kill, we call it now.
So you had a responsibility to maintain the proficiency, to share the tactics. It sounds like. Did you also? I'm trying to compare it to whenever someone in another unit might do time in like an S shop training department. Did you also have the responsibility then of like the logistics for those events as well? I mean, was your day-to-day job was preparing for these FTXs? FTXs, of course, being field training exercises for anyone who doesn't know. But
Right.
I mean, was that more or less your job? So is the logistics, the lead up, planning it, and then also maintaining that tactical proficiency and sharing that, or was that someone else's job?
Yeah, that's interesting. I only had to plan logistics for myself and any other training cadre I was taking with me. It was on the platoon to do, and we would say, this is the loadout you need, this is the gear, this is the op, and then they had to take care of, weapons, ammo, demo. It depended on where we were training. A lot of times, I mean, we had so many places we went around the country, at least the west side. If now, I didn't get into land warfare, which is more of your fire and movement, your basic ambushes. I was more in the kill house than on the firing range, so yeah, it was on the platoons to do what you're talking about. And we would tell them, we would give them lists. We had lists for like every load. Okay, we're going to an island. We're going to be working kill houses for the next week. You need this many rounds. And then their armorers in that platoon, every platoon had an armorer who took care of the weapons and the ammo and demo. And that was their job. And the parachute guys was like, well, our field training exercise is going to be jumping in and assaulting a target. So you're going to need parachutes, you're going to need rounds, you're going to need squares, you're going to need blah, 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 blah.
So would you give a class, or are you the evaluator, or both?
Both. Yeah, both.
Okay.
I'd be giving classes, and I also did a lot of instruction on the shooting range. Like, so there's the kill house. Once you get in the kill house, that's like kind of the final phase, because you're shooting, you're moving, you're doing jam drills where we would put like a dummy bullet. We would give them out magazines, and we would know we want 1 or 2 or 3 jams, see how they respond. So say if you're clearing, and if you're not familiar with this world, your primary weapon jams, you've got to sling it and pull your secondary and continue to engage until you have a moment where you can clear the jam and get back to your primary. But if it's in the middle of clearing a room, you just got to sling it and grab your secondary so you can at least hopefully engage or have some sort of a firing device that's up and running. So there's stuff like that, but we had to work all that out on the shooting range first. So we had all kinds of drills, like jam drills. Sometimes we would try to make it impromptu where guys didn't know it was coming. And that's when we would put it like a dummy round in the middle of their magazine and say, you may get a jam, you may not, but we're going to see how you respond. Other times we would start out slow, like I would do whistle drills. Like I'd have a whistle in my mouth and I'd have two guys on each flank and I'd be kind of in the middle of the range calling out what we're doing. And we're moving, engaging targets. Now I would blow the whistle, which means transition to your secondary. So everybody would do that all at once, which was a SIG P226 is what we used in my day. It was a 9mm. And we were using still MP5s for the most part. Although I was making a case for 5.56 from the last episode. Well, one time we were at a desert shooting range, and there was a chief who it's so stressful. Like I say, I look back at me doing this in my 20s, and I guess I can't. Who put this knucklehead in charge of? Really dangerous, because transitioning weapons and taking safeties off and engaging with live rounds. I mean, it's no joke. I mean, obviously it's no joke, but it's really kind of hairy sometimes. So I'm always watching for what's called safety violations. Do you all call them that in the Army?
Yeah, safety violations.
Safety violations where somebody does something really, and you could be disqualified. You could be failed out of a course and even out of a platoon for too many safety violations.
Right. A safety violation can and has gotten people kicked out of the range regiment. That's a relatively common releasable offense.
Right. And it's also gotten guys kicked out of the SEAL teams. So we had a sniper who had an accidental discharge in the armory indoors with a sniper rifle. That was it. He was out. And probably a good move. That's a real big no-no. But anyhow, accidental discharges are usually safety violations. Now, maybe not in every case. There may be something where the gun did something weird, but most 99 times out of 100, it's not the weapon's fault. It's the operator. So this one particular individual, we were practicing jam drills, securing the submachine gun, the MP5, transitioning to the 9mm, engaging, and then decocking, continuing to move, continuing to walk, decocking, reholstering, and then pulling the primary and clearing it while still walking, right? It's a lot of moving parts. And honestly, I've always liked 1911 45s and Glocks because they don't have all these decocking systems and extra safeties. When you're using them every day, you get used to it. But man, I still now get confused. Just give me a Glock, because I know with a Glock, for example, or a 1911, there's one condition it's in. Finger on the trigger, it's going off.
Right.
I don't have to think about all these different things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, decocking is terrifying. I mean,
it's like the thing's going off.
Yeah,
but it doesn't.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
And
it's supposed to, but it doesn't. Like.
Yeah. I always kind of wince when I decock. I'm like, because this is the time where it's really going to go off.
Right.
But it's without going into the systems of like Berettas and SIGs. But when you decock, it must be in a safe direction. You don't want to be decocking as you're reholstering. That's a no-no. So this particular chief, we were on the range and he had done that. I saw it. He was decocking as it was going into his holster. And I blew the whistle. I said, ceasefire. I said, Chief, you decock. I watched it go into your holster, and that you're going to blow your leg off doing that. And he was here's where I mentioned in the previous episode, I'm back from the Gulf War. I'm like, I'm junior. I'm like 2 ranks. I think he might've been a senior chief, actually. 3 ranks below this guy. And he's been in the teams a lot longer than I have, but was not as proficient, and I had to say to a senior person, and I wasn't chewing him out like in buds or something. I was just like, hey, Chief, if one more time and it's a safety violation, I'm gonna pull you off the range, because I don't want him to get hurt
Right.
or anybody else to get hurt. And he was just like, he got all prickly with me, like, oh, I'm a chief, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, well, my job is to keep the range safe, and I saw you do something very dangerous. So he did it a second time, and I blew the whistle. I said, that's it, you're coming off the range. Well, he got pissy again, and got talked to his officer, and one thing led to another, and they talked me into giving him a third shot. And I'm like, okay, this is not on me at this point. And he did it a third time, and I was watching him. I was almost laser locked on him. I had some other guys helping me on the range, watching guys, and I see the pistol go right down into his holster. I see, I was like, and then he just crumples. He had shot himself right in the calf. And okay, ceasefire, medic, here we go. By God's grace, he didn't permanently disable himself. I mean, we rushed him to Belleville as fast as we could. He was all right. The medic was top notch. Bernie's his name. Bernie, if you're out there, kudos on that day. We'll never forget that one. He did all the right stuff and stabilized him. But it was just a lot of stuff like that that was just really the part I didn't enjoy about training department. I enjoyed a lot of it, but stuff like that was really crazy.
It's interesting for us in the Army, again, back in the aughts in my time, could have changed afterwards. But the training, that crawl, walk, run training was really, you had the support of the battalion. So the higher unit would do a lot of the bigger logistical training, like getting the range, getting your ammo, that type of stuff. The platoon leadership had the responsibility of get everyone together, right? Equipment, all that type of stuff was the same. But in terms of the evaluation during our workup, if you will, our training cycle, it was really, if I'm remembering it right, it was always depending on the level of the training. So if it was like a team event, your platoon leadership would be the ones evaluating you, training and evaluating you. Your own direct leadership would train you. So let's say you're doing a shoot house, but it's like a team shoot house event. Well, your team leader and your squad leader, they're the ones training you, and then you're evaluated by your platoon leader and your platoon sergeant. And then if you and then if
Mm,
you do, and then as you work up, they add on the layer of, but I don't remember there being like our training folks were mostly logistical. They were not tactical subject matter experts necessarily. They were
right.
more for laying on the range and hey, you guys got everything you need. And it was really upon the leadership, the direct chain of leadership, chain of command to
Interesting.
do the training and evaluation. So that's one area where it seems like it's different.
Yeah.
Like if we were on a range, it would just be we wouldn't have a third party there
Right.
watching us, evaluating us. Only for big events,
Mhm.
the biggest events would you have observer controllers, whatever you want to call them, evaluators, who could be some senior NCO from the battalion or regiment or whatever. So that's one area where it's a little bit different. So
Interesting. That is a bit different. I will say, once you deployed, um, and you're like, say in the Philippines, this happened a couple times. Once you get downrange, there is no more training department. It then becomes the platoon commander's responsibility to oversee and evaluate it on some level.
mhm, right.
But when we were in CONUS doing workups, it was the training department, and we basically, the platoon commander had the responsibility of seeing who's talented at what, and who's going to be in first squad, who's going to be in second squad, who's going to be my hot shot this or that sniper. But the training department was like pass fail as a platoon. You
Mhm,
you got to do this again and prove better proficiency, or you've got to do some remedial work because
mhm,
you're
mhm.
not ready. And it was actually the training officer who finally signed off on it, but it was all of us mid-level enlisted who were doing okay, these guys, they're looking a little weak here, they need a little more time on the range here. So yeah.
So that time at the range was not the only accident that you were an
No,
observer of or a party to, if you will. What
no,
else? What else went
no.
down?
Yeah, worst thing I saw when I was in training department it was an air operation. There was a platoon doing a workup called golf platoon, and they had a sister platoon. I can't remember which one that was, but there were a lot of new guys in that platoon. I mean, at least 10 or more new guys. I can't remember exactly. They had all just can't come from Benning, and were and so in the Navy and the Marine Corps, we have we when you graduate from Fort Benning, you get basic airborne wings, which we call them the lead sled. It's the basic airborne wings. I don't know what else to call them.
They're
And
it's a classic look.
yeah,
It's a retro look.
it's what you wore on your hat, Patrick.
Yeah,
Yeah, you,
exactly.
yeah.
It's what I wore on my Braves cap.
No, man, I was so proud to get them. Man, that was another thing to put on my uniform to say, look at this.
That's right.
But no, yeah. But in the Marine Corps and the Navy, if that okay, you have to have 5 successful jumps to graduate, and then you get your basic airborne wings. Well, the first thing we want to do as SEALs is get bigger bling on our uniform, among other things. Actually, jumping became fun. It really did, if you're doing it right. I actually eventually enjoyed jumping, unlike Patrick, because he had a lot of round parachute combat equipment loads, which that is not fun. But other ways to jump can be fun. So the first thing guys want to do is get that. So in the Navy and Marine Corps, if you get 10 or more jumps, you get what's called Navy Marine Corps parachutist wings, and they're gold, and they kind of look cooler. They almost look like flight wings or something,
Right.
like pilot wings, but
Right.
they're cool looking, and they're gold. So that sticks out. So we had a lot of times where we had a day where, okay, we have an air asset over here. We have a C-130, or we have a Chinook, or something that's just going to take us up and do what we call elevator rides. Take us up, we jump, repack, or in this case, we would have a bunch of chutes ready. They couldn't repack their own rounds. Guys could repack their own squares. In fact, you had to if you're free falling. But and so we had a day where they were going to try to get all 5 jumps in, and get their gold wings, and then go out to McPee's and talk about how cool they are because now they got their gold wings. But these are new guys. They're brand new. They're all full of adrenaline and testosterone. Not a particularly good combination. And I had to give the jump brief. I was working in assaults, but for whatever reason that day they said, "Hey, Watkins, can you do the jump brief for these guys? They're going to go out." And I'm like, "Sure, I've done a million of them. Let's go." Now I stayed back because I had other stuff I had to do in training. There was another jump master who was going to put them out of the plane, and they had a whole DZ crew, drop zone crew, who was going to do the setting up of the tee and the wind and all that. But somebody had to give them their safety brief, so I did, and I could tell just right away. I'm like, okay, I took them serious. I always took the safety brief serious for what appeared to me to be obvious reasons. I'm like, okay, guys, let's go. And they were cocky as hell, and just you could see they were joking with each other. And I'm like, guys, I know this sounds like a bunch of ridiculous stuff, but there are a couple of really important points I want to make. I'll go over the stuff that really doesn't matter, like aircraft emergency. You're going to hear 3 loud rings on the in the plane. You're not going to really do much about that. It's going to be up to the pilots. But here's what's really important. And I said, I cut to the chase. And one there are several things that are really important. And I think one of the most, and Patrick would know this, is called altitude awareness, basic awareness of where everybody is when you're coming down. So they're jumping, 8, 10, 12 guys, right? Because if you come out of the plane at different, one person jumps, another person jumps, another person jumps. So your first guy's the lowest, your second guy's the second, and so forth. Well, with a round parachute, it's really important that you don't see, here's a parachute. Here's the low parachute. It's really important that the higher parachute doesn't cross over the lower parachute, because what happens is it's creating a vortex and it's sucking the air, creating a twisty vacuum that can cause the top one to collapse. And if you're close enough,
The bottom one. The bottom one, right?
the bottom one causes
Right.
the top one to collapse. Yeah,
Right.
because
Yeah.
it's stealing the air. We call it stealing the air.
Right.
It's creating this draft, this overflow that it can't maintain that tension. So whatever you do, the higher jumper, the lower jumper always has the right of way, because a lower jumper can't see above his own canopy. So, but a higher jumper can always see the lower jumper, and you've got to always be doing this. And it's a lot of things to keep together at once. Like, am I into the wind? Where's the DZ? Where am I going? And you can steer them a little bit, but you got to make sure you don't cross over directly over a guy below you, because it can steal the air, cause the canopy to collapse, and you'll plummet. Well, and if you're high enough, that might not be a bad thing, because you kind of bounce off the canopy and float off, and it reinflates. That has happened. I've seen guys walk off the top of canopies before, which is weird. But you don't want to mess around. And I was trying to get this point across, and I could tell they were just kind of blowing it off. Several of them were really serious and dialed in. But a couple of them were just like, "Ha, we got this. Yeah, we just came back from Benning." Like, well, okay. Anyhow, so right before they departed for the jump, I said, "Guys, I want to ask you one more question. What's the most important thing out there today?" And I think one or two of them said exactly. I just let it hang for a second, because I saw a couple of them. I don't think they heard me. And a couple of the ones that were paying attention said altitude awareness, low man has the right of way. Like, okay, I said it 3 times, and that's all I can do. Good luck. Have a fun time, but be safe. And they're off. So I go back to my desk in training department and getting ready for something. I don't know what. And a few hours later, we get a call. I get a call from the training officer, and he said, "Hey, come into my office." And I said, "I get this sinking feeling in my stomach," because I'm like, "Yes, sir." He goes, "There's been a real bad mishap on the DZ." And I'm like, what was it? He said, apparently they're rushing him to Balboa. That's our medical center. He he lost his awareness, crossed over a low jumper at about 250 feet above the ground. Okay, so you know the deal. His parachute collapsed. He went plummeting down, broke his spine, and ended up paraplegic for the rest of his life. In fact, I saw an advertisement. I was in a B-dubs of all places, having some lunch, and his name is Al Kovac. He's doing I want to contact him. I've got to find his organization. He's doing a military benefit for disabled vets and so forth. But this guy he was one of the top swimmers. He had swim times in the Olympic brackets, and a great guy, just a really lovable guy. I don't know how. I went to see him and met his parents in the hospital, and but just so tragic that just like 10 seconds of loss of focus could result in that. So what that eventually led to, and I think we're running down on time here, is that in a future episode, I'll talk about how that impacted my stint with training department.
Well, you and I know, but other people might not know that in special operations and airborne units, if you're on a tank crew, being in the military is a dangerous job, and most of the time, it's not the enemy that gets us. It's mishaps, accidents, negligence that's happening when you're in training. So
Exactly.
I got stories like that too. But we'll follow up in future episodes. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you all next time.